What if I told you that you have never truly seen the world as it truly is, and that, fundamentally, you never will? This isn't a riddle, nor a fleeting philosophical game. This is a profound assertion, one that sits at the very core of how we understand our existence, our knowledge, and our place within the cosmos. Pause for a moment and consider the simple act of perception. The warmth of the sun on your skin, the vivid color of a flower, the distinct sound of a distant voice. We operate under the natural, almost automatic assumption that these are direct transmissions from an objective world, unfiltered and immediate. We believe our senses are transparent windows, granting us unmediated access to reality itself. But what if this deeply ingrained assumption is, in fact, the greatest illusion? Imagine, instead, that everything you touch, everything you see, everything you hear is not an exact replica of an external reality, but rather a sophisticated, intricate fabrication of your own mind. Your brain, with its vast and complex architecture, doesn't merely receive raw data from the world. It actively constructs your experience of it. It takes light waves and transforms them into the perception of color. It takes vibrations in the air and converts them into the sound of music or speech. It takes countless electrical impulses and sculpts them into the sensations of texture and temperature. Your eyes, therefore, are not passive windows through which you gaze upon an unadulterated reality. They are, much more accurately, powerful projectors. They don't simply reflect what is. They actively participate in shaping, structuring, and creating the world that appears before you. The reality you inhabit, the one you interact with every single day, is a complex, beautiful, and utterly consistent projection, generated internally, based on external stimuli we can never directly access. The world as it exists, independently of your perception, the thing in itself, as it were, remains forever beyond your direct grasp. You are intimately familiar with the world as it appears to you, but never with the world as it truly is in its essence. Your consciousness acts as both the screen and the projector, displaying a reality that is undeniably real to you, yet simultaneously deeply subjective. Now, if you truly absorb and understand this single profound idea, that our minds are the active architects of the reality we perceive, rather than passive observers, then every single scientific fact you hold, every religious belief you cherish, and every fundamental assumption about the objective nature of existence will be turned upside down. The very ground beneath your understanding of the universe will shift, revealing a perspective both unsettling and extraordinarily liberating. This realization forces us to reevaluate the limits of human knowledge and the true scope of our intellectual endeavor. Welcome to the Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. This is not just a book. It's a journey into the very foundations of human understanding, guided by a mind that irrevocably altered the course of philosophy. Forget what you might imagine about dusty academic texts or stuffy professors. Immanuel Kant was no ordinary scholar. He was the intellectual earthquake that shook philosophy awake, challenging centuries of assumptions and forcing us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about knowledge, reality, and ourselves. He was the man who, in his own words, pulled philosophy from its dogmatic slumber. Before Kant, the dominant view was straightforward. Our minds were essentially passive recipients. We looked at the world, and the world, with all its objects and phenomena, imprinted itself upon our consciousness. Our ideas were reflections of things as they truly existed out there, independent of us. The task of philosophy, then, was to figure out how accurately our mental representations matched that external, objective reality. The mind, it was believed, conformed to objects. But what if this fundamental assumption was precisely backward? Consider the seismic shift ignited by Nicholas Copernicus in the 16th century. For millennia, humanity believed the Earth stood still at the center of the universe, with the sun and stars orbiting around us. It was an intuitive, self-centered view. Copernicus dared to suggest the opposite, that the Earth, along with the other planets, actually revolved around the sun. This wasn't just a change in astronomical models. It was a revolution in perspective, forcing humanity to relinquish its perceived centrality and accept a new, counterintuitive truth. Kant saw a striking parallel in the realm of philosophy, and he proposed what is now famously known as the Copernican Revolution of thought. Just as Copernicus inverted our understanding of the cosmos, Kant inverted our understanding of knowledge itself. He suggested that instead of our cognition conforming to objects, it is, in fact, objects that must conform to our cognition. This isn't to say that we invent reality, but rather that the very structure of our minds, the inherent ways we are built to perceive and process information, actively shapes and organizes the world we experience. Our minds aren't just blank slates receiving impressions. They're active architects, imposing their own framework on the raw data of sensation. We don't just see things. We experience them through the lens of our innate mental categories, concepts like space, time, and causality. These aren't properties of objects in themselves, but rather the necessary conditions under which we can experience anything at all. This revolutionary insight is the beating heart of Kant's critique. It means that we can only ever know things as they appear to us, filtered and structured by our human faculties, not as they might exist in themselves, independent of any observer. It draws a profound boundary around what human intelligence can grasp. So, prepare yourself. As we delve deeper into Kant's extraordinary work, we will explore the implications of this radical shift. By the end of this hour, you will learn the strict limits of human intelligence and why crossing them leads to madness. In our journey through Immanuel Kant's monumental The Critique of Pure Reason, we confront a fundamental question. How do we know what we know? Kant's answer begins with a crucial distinction, an idea so foundational that it underpins everything else. He proposes that all our knowledge stems from two distinct, yet equally indispensable sources. We call this big idea number one, the two sources of knowledge. Imagine the very act of knowing. For Kant, it's not a single process, but a dynamic interplay between two different faculties of the mind, sensibility and understanding. First, sensibility. This is our capacity to receive impressions, to be affected by objects. Think of it as our passive faculty, the gateway through which raw data from the world streams into us. Our senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, are its instruments, providing us with intuitions, immediate perceptions of individual things. When you see a tree or feel the sun, that raw, unorganized experience is an act of sensibility. It delivers the initial, unordered stream of sensory information. But this raw data isn't knowledge yet. For that, we need the second source, understanding. This is our active faculty, the power to think, to spontaneously produce concepts, and to organize sensory input into coherent thoughts. Understanding doesn't just receive, it structures. It takes the disparate bits of information from sensibility and brings them under general rules, allowing us to form judgments and make sense of the world. Where sensibility provides the data, understanding provides the mental architecture to interpret it. So for Kant, knowledge is always a collaborative effort. It absolutely requires these two ingredients, raw data from our senses and a structured processing power of our minds. Neither can produce genuine knowledge alone. To grasp this more vividly, Kant offers a brilliant metaphor, that of a mold and clay. Our senses, through sensibility, bring us the shapeless, unformed clay, the raw, undifferentiated mass of sensory impressions. Without this clay, there's nothing to work with. But this clay, on its own, lacks form and meaning. Our mind, through understanding, provides the mold. This mold represents the inherent structure, the concepts our mind applies to the raw data. The mold shapes the clay, giving it definition, boundaries, and a recognizable form. Without the mold, the clay remains an amorphous blob. Only when clay is pressed into the mold does a distinct object come into being. This analogy clarifies why both are indispensable. Clay without a mold is a mess. A mold without clay is an empty shape. In the same vein, Kant famously declares, "Thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind." Let's unpack that profound statement. Thoughts without content are empty. This refers to our understanding. If our mind attempts to think without any sensory input, without content from sensibility, then our thoughts are barren. It's like an intricate mold with no clay to fill it. We might have the structure for a concept, but if there's no corresponding sensory experience, no actual stuff from the world, it remains an empty intellectual exercise, a mere logical possibility without real-world knowledge. Our thoughts would be abstract shells, devoid of substance. Conversely, intuitions without concepts are blind. This speaks to sensibility. If we are bombarded by pure sensory data, intuitions, without the organizing power of understanding, without concepts to make sense of it, then that experience is meaningless. It's like an abundance of shapeless clay, but no mold to give it form. Imagine a chaotic barrage of colors and sounds without the mind's ability to categorize or identify them. The experience is simply an overwhelming blur. It's blind because we cannot perceive objects or events as distinct, meaningful entities. We would merely be experiencing a torrent of raw feeling without comprehension. Therefore, true knowledge, for Kant, emerges only when sensibility and understanding work in perfect concert. Sensibility furnishes us with the objects. Understanding thinks them. The senses deliver the raw materials, and the intellect processes and structures those materials into meaningful knowledge. This fundamental partnership between our passive reception and active organization allows us to perceive a coherent world and gain genuine understanding. This distinction is not merely academic. It's the very bedrock of Kant's philosophical system, revealing how our minds actively participate in constructing the reality we experience. It sets the stage for how he will explore the limits and possibilities of human reason. Welcome back as we delve deeper into Immanuel Kant's monumental work, The Critique of Pure Reason. In our previous discussion, we explored the foundations of his philosophical quest. Now, we arrive at what many consider the very heart of his endeavor, a concept so profound it's often called the holy grail of philosophy, the synthetic a priori. This isn't just a fancy phrase. It represents a specific kind of knowledge that Kant believed was essential for understanding how we can know anything about the world with certainty. It's the unique blend of knowledge that is both universal, meaning it applies everywhere and always, and also informative, meaning it genuinely tells us something new, something that expands our understanding, rather than merely restating what we already know. To grasp this crucial idea, we must first understand the two distinct pairs of terms Kant uses to categorize all knowledge. Let's begin with the first pair, analytic versus synthetic judgments. An analytic judgment is one where the predicate, or what we're saying about the subject, is already contained within the subject itself. Think of it like unpacking a definition. For example, consider the statement, "All bachelors are unmarried men." The concept of unmarried man is inherently part of the concept of bachelor. You don't learn anything new by hearing this statement. You're simply clarifying a term. Analytic judgments are true by definition. They're logically necessary, and they don't expand our knowledge of the world. They are, in essence, tautologies, statements that are true purely by virtue of their meaning. In contrast, a synthetic judgment is one where the predicate adds new information to the subject. The predicate is not contained within the subject. For instance, the chair in the corner is red. The concept of red is not an inherent part of the concept of chair. To know this statement is true, you must look at the chair. This judgment genuinely expands your knowledge. It tells you something new about the specific chair. Synthetic judgments inform us about the world, but their truth often depends on experience. With those definitions in mind, let's introduce the second crucial distinction, a priori versus a posteriori knowledge. A priori knowledge is knowledge that we possess independently of experience. It doesn't rely on observation or sensory input. When we say something is known a priori, we mean it's universally true and necessarily true. You don't need to go out and test it in the world. Its truth can be established through reason alone. Classic examples include mathematical truths, like 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, or logical principles like A cannot be A and not A at the same time. You understand these without having to experience every instance of addition or contradiction. Conversely, a posteriori knowledge is knowledge that we gain through experience. It's empirical knowledge, derived from our senses and observations of the world around us. For example, it is raining outside right now. To know this, you have to look outside or feel the rain. A posteriori knowledge is contingent. It could be otherwise. It's also particular, specific to certain times and places, and not necessarily universal. Now let's combine these distinctions, and this is where Kant's philosophy truly takes flight. Traditionally, philosophers had largely assumed a straightforward alignment. Analytic judgments were a priori, true by definition, known independently of experience, and synthetic judgments were a posteriori, new information, known through experience. This seemed intuitive. You could have analytic a priori judgments, such as all triangles have 3 sides. This is true by definition, analytic, and you don't need to measure every triangle in the world to know it a priori. And you could have synthetic a posteriori judgments, like some birds migrate south for the winter. This gives you new information, synthetic, and you discover it by observing birds a posteriori. But Kant identified a third, profoundly important category, one that was, for him, the key to understanding all scientific and even metaphysical knowledge, the synthetic a priori. This is the magic formula, the truly revolutionary concept. A synthetic a priori judgment is one that adds new information. It's synthetic, but its truth is known independently of experience. It's a priori. How can this be? How can we gain genuine, new knowledge about the universe without having to go out and experience it first? Kant argued that mathematics is a prime example. Take this simple arithmetic statement. 7 plus 5 is equal to 12. Is it analytic? No. The concept of 12 is not contained within the concepts of 7 or 5, or even the act of addition itself. You have to perform a mental operation, a synthesis, to arrive at 12. So, it's synthetic. It provides new information. But is it a posteriori? Do you need to count 7 apples and then 5 more apples every single time to know that their sum is 12? No. The truth of 7 plus 5 is equal to 12 is universal and necessary. It holds true always and everywhere, regardless of any particular experience. Therefore, mathematical truths, for Kant, are synthetic a priori judgments. Another powerful example comes from the realm of physics and our understanding of the world. Consider the principle, every event has a cause. Is this analytic? Is the concept of having a cause contained within the concept of event? Kant would argue no. We don't simply unpack the definition of event to find cause. Rather, we synthesize this connection. We learn something new about the structure of reality by applying this principle. But is it a posteriori? Do we discover through experience that every single event has a cause? While experience shows us many causal connections, we don't observe causality itself as an entity. Instead, Kant argued, the principle of causality is a fundamental way our minds structure experience. It's a necessary condition for us to make sense of the world at all. We project this principle onto reality, making it a truth we know a priori, even though it's synthetic. This category, the synthetic a priori, is what allows for objective knowledge in fields like mathematics and Newtonian physics. It explains how we can have universal, necessary truths that genuinely expand our understanding of the world, rather than just clarifying definitions. For Kant, our minds are not passive receivers of information. They actively shape and organize our experience through these inherent synthetic a priori principles. This means that certain fundamental features of reality, like space, time, and causality, are not simply out there to be discovered empirically, but are rather conditions that our minds impose on our perception, making objective knowledge possible in the first place. Understanding the synthetic a priori is paramount to grasping the entire scope of Kant's critical philosophy. It's his answer to the question of how knowledge is possible, grounding both the certainty of scientific laws and setting the limits for what pure reason can truly know about the world beyond our experience. We've arrived at a truly pivotal moment in our journey, a concept that will fundamentally challenge how you perceive reality itself. This is Big Idea 3, the goggles of space and time. For centuries, indeed for all of recorded history, we've instinctively understood space and time as vast, external containers. Think of it. The universe stretches out infinitely in space, and events unfold sequentially in time. It feels so obvious, so self-evident, that space and time are simply out there, independent of us, waiting for things to happen within them. They seem like the ultimate, objective framework of reality. But now, prepare for the shocker. Immanuel Kant invites us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about these most basic elements of our existence. He delivers a truly radical proposition, one that will echo through the halls of philosophy forever. Space and time do not exist out there in the universe. They're not external containers, not objective properties of things in themselves, waiting to be discovered. So, if they aren't out there, where are they? Kant's groundbreaking answer is that space and time are what he calls forms of intuition. Now, that might sound like academic jargon, but let's unlock it with a powerful, relatable metaphor. Imagine you were born wearing an utterly unique, entirely irremovable pair of goggles. These aren't just any goggles. They're your very means of seeing, of perceiving anything at all. You can't take them off. You can't even conceive of seeing without them. These are the goggles of space and time. We are all born wearing them. They are inherent structures of our mind, fundamental to how we process and organize any sensory experience. Everything we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell is automatically filtered and arranged through these built-in conceptual frameworks. Without them, our perception would be an unintelligible, chaotic jumble. Let's put this to the test with a simple thought experiment. Try, for a moment, to imagine an object. Any object, a table, a chair, a star, a tiny atom. Got it? Now, try to imagine that object without space. Can you picture a table that isn't somewhere? A star that occupies no location, has no dimensions, no spatial relationship to anything else? It's impossible, isn't it? The very act of imagining an object demands that it exists in space. You can imagine an empty space, certainly, but you cannot imagine an object that is not in space. This isn't because the object itself possesses spaceness as an inherent quality. Instead, it proves that space is a fundamental condition of our mind, a prerequisite for our ability to perceive and organize any object. It's not a property of the object itself existing independently. It's the lens through which we must view it. And the same holds true for time. Try to imagine an event. Any event, a ball falling, a thought crossing your mind, the sun rising, without it happening in time. An event that has no duration, no past or future, no sequence relative to other events. It's equally inconceivable. Our minds automatically situate every experience, every happening, within a temporal framework. This isn't because time objectively exists as an independent river carrying all events. It's because our mind structures experience sequentially. So, space and time are not things we discover out there in the world. They're the very scaffolding our minds use to build the world of our experience. They are subjective conditions of our sensibility, the inherent forms that shape all possible appearances for us. We don't perceive things and then put them into space and time. Rather, we can only perceive things because our minds inherently structure them in space and time. This revolutionary insight is the heart of Kant's Transcendental aesthetic, the first major division of the critique of pure reason. It means that what we experience as the external world is not a direct apprehension of things in themselves, but rather phenomena, appearances shaped by the fundamental, universal structures of our own minds. It's a truly humbling, yet empowering, realization. Our minds are not passive receivers of reality. They are active constructors, shaping the very framework of everything we can possibly know and experience. We don't just look at reality. In a profound sense, we co-create its form. And understanding this, understanding our goggles of space and time, is the first vital step in understanding the true limits and possibilities of human knowledge. The critique of pure reason. In our previous discussions, we've delved into how our senses provide the raw material of experience. Now, we turn our attention to what Kant considers the very architecture of our minds, the inherent structures that allow us to make sense of that sensory input. This brings us to Big Idea 4, the categories of understanding. Imagine for a moment that your mind comes equipped with a sophisticated operating system, pre-installed with essential software. This, in Kant's philosophy, is what he calls transcendental logic, the pre-installed software of the human mind. It's not something we learn through experience, but rather the fundamental framework that makes experience possible and coherent in the first place. These are the built-in rules, the conceptual tools, that our intellect actively uses to organize the chaotic stream of sensations into an understandable world. These inherent structures are what Kant terms the categories of understanding. Think of them as universal concepts, fundamental ways our mind has of relating and processing information. While there are several of these categories, let's focus on a few key examples to grasp their profound significance. Concepts like causality, necessity, and unity. Consider causality, the principle of cause and effect, which seems so intuitive, so obviously a part of the world around us. When one event predictably follows another, we instinctively conclude that the first caused the second. But here's Kant's radical insight. The relationship of cause and effect isn't something we empirically observe in nature itself. You never actually see the cause itself. You only ever perceive one event happening, immediately followed by another event. Our minds, according to Kant, don't just passively receive information. Instead, they actively impose the rule of causality onto the sequence of events. It is a fundamental rule our mind forces onto nature to make sense of the flow of time and to connect disparate occurrences into a logical, predictable order. Without this built-in category, our experience will be nothing more than a random, disconnected series of perceptions. Let's illustrate this with a classic example. Imagine two billiard balls on a table. One ball, let's call it ball A, rolls across the green felt and strikes ball B. Immediately, ball B begins to move. What do you observe with your senses? You see ball A moving, then touching ball B, and then ball B moving. You see a sequence of events. But do you see the force that ball A exerts on ball B? Do you physically see the causality itself, distinct from the movement? No, you don't. What happens is that our mind takes these two distinct events, ball A hitting ball B and ball B moving, and actively injects the concept of causality to link them. Our pre-installed mental software, the category of causality, bridges the gap between observation and understanding, allowing us to perceive a necessary connection, a cause, where our eyes only perceive a succession. This is not something we learn. It's how our mind is wired to interpret the world. It is the very mechanism through which we establish order and intelligibility. Similarly, other categories like necessity and unity function in the same way. The concept of something being necessary, that it must be so, is not extracted from experience. Rather, our minds apply this category to certain relations within our experience to establish a sense of unwavering truth. The category of unity, on the other hand, allows us to synthesize multiple perceptions into a single, coherent object or idea, preventing our experience from fragmenting into an incomprehensible jumble. So, Kant argues, while our senses provide the raw, unformed data of the world, it is these pre-installed categories of understanding, this transcendental logic, that actively shape, organize, and structure that data into the meaningful, coherent reality we inhabit. Our minds are not passive recipients, but active constructors of our understanding of the world, employing these fundamental conceptual tools to create order from potential chaos. They are, quite literally, the indispensable blueprint for our experience. the critique of pure reason. In this session, we delve into Big Idea 5, a concept so profound it reshapes our very understanding of existence. The distinction between phenomena and noumena. At its heart lies a truly astonishing, and perhaps even terrifying, conclusion. An absolute, unyielding barrier stands between appearance and reality itself. Imagine, if you will, that your mind is not merely a passive receiver of information, but an active participant, a kind of internal sculptor of what you perceive. This is where we begin our journey into Kant's groundbreaking insight. Let's first define what Kant calls the phenomena. This term refers to the world as it appears to us, the world we experience, interact with, and come to know through our senses and our intellect. Think of everything you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. The vibrant colors of sunset, the comforting warmth of a cup of tea, the intricate pattern of a snowflake. All of these, for Kant, are phenomenal. But what does it mean that they appear to us? It means that our experience of reality is not a direct, unmediated encounter with things as they are in themselves. Instead, it's a filtered reality, processed and structured by the very architecture of our minds. Kant argues that we inherently perceive the world through certain fundamental frameworks, primarily through the lenses of space and time. We cannot conceive of an object existing outside of space, nor can we imagine an event occurring outside of time. These aren't properties of objects out there, independent of us, but rather the very forms our minds impose on whatever input they receive. Beyond space and time, our understanding is further shaped by what Kant calls the categories of the understanding. These are innate conceptual tools like cause and effect, substance and unity, which allow us to make sense of our sensations, to organize them into coherent experiences, and to form judgments about them. So, when you see a ball fall, you don't just see a sequence of images. Your mind automatically applies the category of cause and effect, understanding that the release of the ball caused it to drop. Therefore, the phenomenal world is not merely a collection of raw sense data. It is reality as constructed by human consciousness, filtered through our inherent forms of intuition, space and time, and organized by our innate categories of understanding. It's the only world we can possibly know and describe with scientific laws and rational principles. Now, let's turn to the other side of this absolute barrier, the noumena. If phenomena are the world as it appears to us, then the noumena represents something radically different. This is what Kant calls the thing in itself, or in German, das Ding in sich. The noumena are reality independent of our observation, independent of our senses, our minds, our space, our time, and our categories. It is reality utterly apart from any human filtering or structuring. It is the world as it truly is, unperceived, untouched by consciousness. Imagine trying to see something without using your eyes, hear something without your ears, or grasp a concept without using any mental framework. That's the conceptual leap Kant is asking us to make. The noumenal world is the realm of ultimate reality, the true nature of things beyond the veil of our human perception. And this brings us to Kant's truly terrifying, yet profoundly significant conclusion. We are, he argues, forever locked in the phenomenal world. The absolute barrier between appearance and reality is impenetrable. We can never, not even in principle, have direct knowledge of the noumenal world. The thing in itself is logically unknowable to us. Why? Because any attempt to know the noumenon, to grasp the thing in itself, would immediately subject it to our forms of intuition, space and time, and our categories of understanding. The moment we try to perceive it, to think about it, to categorize it, it ceases to be noumenal and instantly becomes phenomenal. It becomes an appearance, structured and interpreted by our minds. It's like trying to see the color of light before it hits your retina, or feel the texture of an object before it touches your skin. The very act of perceiving transforms it into something accessible to us, and thus phenomenal. This is not a limitation we can overcome with better technology or more powerful telescopes. It's a fundamental, inescapable condition of human cognition. Our knowledge is necessarily limited to the world of appearances. We can explore the phenomenal world endlessly, expanding our scientific understanding, mapping its laws, and predicting its behavior. But what lies behind it, the ultimate reality, remains forever veiled, a horizon we can always point to but never cross. This deep distinction between phenomena and noumena is perhaps one of the most significant and challenging ideas in all of philosophy. It means that our most profound truths, our most rigorous sciences, and our most cherished beliefs about reality are all rooted in the phenomenal world, the world of human experience. The true essence of things, independent of our minds, remains a realm beyond our grasp, a logical unknowable, forever separated by that absolute barrier. It is a humbling and revolutionary thought, forever altering our understanding of the limits and scope of human reason. The transcendental unity of apperception, a concept so central to Kant's philosophy that it often feels like the very key to unlocking the universe within you. At its heart, this idea is about nothing less than the eye that holds the universe together. Take a moment to consider your own experience. Every second, a barrage of sensations floods your mind. The sound of a distant car, the feel of the air on your skin, the visual information of your surroundings, a fleeting thought, a memory bubbling up. These are all distinct, fragmented pieces of data. If you were merely a passive receiver, wouldn't your world be an utterly chaotic, disjointed kaleidoscope of split-second perceptions, constantly dissolving and reforming without continuity? How do these separate, fleeting sensations manage to cohere into a continuous, unified experience? A single, stable world experienced by a single, stable self. This is where Kant introduces a revolutionary idea, perhaps one of his most powerful insights, the necessity of the I think. He argues that for any experience, any perception, any thought, in his words, any representation, to even be an experience for us, it must be capable of being accompanied by the thought, I think. This isn't just a grammatical nicety. It's a fundamental condition of consciousness. Think about it. If you see a tree, you don't just register tree. You register, I see a tree. If you hear a sound, it's not merely sound. It's I hear a sound. Even if you don't consciously vocalize it, that implicit I think is the bedrock upon which all your perceptions are built. It's the invisible thread that ties together every single bit of information you encounter, asserting ownership and thereby unifying it. This I isn't just a casual observer in the theater of your mind. Far from it. This self is the active, synthesizing anchor that performs the incredible feat of taking the raw, undifferentiated chaos of sensory data and transforming it into a coherent, organized world. The reality you perceive and interact with every moment. Without this unifying principle, your consciousness will be shattered into a million independent fragments, each sensation utterly divorced from the next. You wouldn't have a stream of consciousness. You'd have disconnected flashes. The transcendental unity of apperception, then, describes this necessary, foundational capacity of self-consciousness. It's transcendental because it's not something we learn through experience. Rather, it's the very condition that makes experience possible. It's the unity because it ensures that all our diverse representations, all our thoughts and perceptions, belong to one subject, to you. It's this singular I that gathers the scattered fragments of sensation and thought and binds them together into a unified story, a single narrative of existence that is your experience of the world. So, when Kant speaks of the transcendental unity of apperception, he's pointing to the ultimate ground of your personal reality, the inherent, non-empirical I that acts as the supreme organizer and synthesizer of all your knowledge and experience. It is in the most profound sense the I that holds your universe together, making sense out of the chaos, and allowing you to know yourself and the world around you as a coherent, continuous whole. The illusions of pure reason. Here, we delve into a fascinating, perhaps even unsettling aspect of our minds. What truly happens when logic, our powerful tool for understanding, inadvertently oversteps its natural boundaries? Kant invites us to consider a particular kind of mental misstep, not an error born of ignorance, but rather a profound, natural tendency of human intellect itself. He calls this transcendental illusion. Imagine for a moment that our mind comes equipped with a set of internal tools, fundamental concepts like cause and effect, substance, or unity. These are incredibly useful for organizing the world of our experience, the empirical world we perceive with our senses. We use them constantly to make sense of what happens around us. However, transcendental illusion arises when our mind, quite naturally, attempts to apply these very same tools to concepts that lie beyond any possible experience. Think of ideas like God, the immortal soul, or the universe as a complete, infinite totality. These are not things we can ever directly observe or touch. Yet our reason instinctively yearns to understand them, to fit them into its conceptual framework. It's a profound, almost unavoidable, impulse to grasp the ungraspable. To better understand this, Kant asks us to compare it to an optical illusion. You've likely seen images where lines appear to be different lengths, even though you know, rationally, that they are identical. Or perhaps a drawing that seems to move even when it's perfectly still. The crucial point here is this. Even after you've been told it's an illusion, even after you've measured the lines or consciously decided the drawing isn't moving, the perception of the illusion often persists. Your eyes still see the lines as unequal. Your brain still registers movement. Transcendental illusion functions in much the same way for our intellect. Even when our critical reason meticulously demonstrates that we cannot legitimately apply categories like causality to something outside of space and time. For instance, trying to prove God's existence through cause and effect, the mind's inherent tendency to do so doesn't simply vanish. The illusion doesn't disappear just because we intellectually understand its falsehood. It's a deeply ingrained structural feature of our cognition. Not a mistake we can simply choose to switch off. This powerful, persistent illusion stems from reason's deepest drive. Its insatiable quest for completeness, for a total and unified understanding of everything. Reason naturally seeks to synthesize all knowledge into a coherent whole, to find ultimate explanations and final causes. It desires to move beyond the fragmented world of our experience and arrive at absolute, unconditioned truths. But here lies the inherent danger. When this legitimate drive for completeness pushes reason to apply its categories to the noumenal realm, that is, the world of things in themselves as they exist independently of our perception, it generates intractable problems. This is the realm beyond appearances, beyond what our senses or intellect can possibly apprehend. When our mind tries to force these ultimate, non-empirical ideas into its experiential frameworks, it inevitably leads to contradictions and paradoxes. Reason, in its noble pursuit of absolute knowledge, ties itself in knots, producing seemingly irrefutable arguments for two entirely opposing viewpoints. So, Kant's warning is clear and profound. The very structure of pure reason, its desire for logical coherence and total understanding, can become its own greatest pitfall. It's not a flaw in our intelligence, but rather an inherent, often beautiful, yet potentially misleading aspect of how our minds are built. Understanding these illusions is not about eradicating them, but about learning to recognize their presence and respecting the necessary boundaries of our own rational capacities. Welcome back, listeners. In this chapter, Big Idea number 8, we confront one of philosophy's most enduring questions, one that touches upon our very sense of self, the nature of the soul. Here, Kant delves into what he terms the paralogisms, and his conclusion is both humbling and profound. Logic, by itself, ultimately fails to prove the existence of an immortal soul. For centuries, philosophers and theologians alike wrestled with the concept of the soul, seeking to demonstrate its existence, its simplicity, its immortality, purely through the power of reason. This pursuit formed the backbone of what was known as rational psychology. It attempted to deduce the fundamental properties of our inner being, our I, from the mere fact that we think. But Kant, with his characteristic rigor, uncovers a fundamental flaw in this line of reasoning, exposing it as a series of subtle, yet critical, logical errors. At the heart of the problem lies our understanding of the I. When we say I think, we are referring to the very subject of all our thoughts, sensations, and experiences. This I is indeed present in every act of consciousness, providing the necessary unity for our perception of the world. Without an I that synthesizes diverse experiences, everything would be a chaotic jumble, utterly disconnected. So, the I think represents the logical condition for any experience whatsoever. It is the point from which all our knowledge stems. However, Kant argues this I is not something we can know as an object, a substance, or a thing in itself. We can only apprehend it as a function of thought, as the necessary, unifying activity that makes thinking possible. Think of it this way. When you observe the world, you see trees, houses, people. These are distinct objects. But can you observe the observer itself in the same way? Can you hold up your eye and examine its properties like you would a stone or a star? No. The eye remains the constant subject that experiences, never fully becoming an object of its own experience. It is the ungraspable ground of our subjective reality. The paralogism, then, arises from a critical confusion. Because the I think is always one and the same throughout all my representations, and because it appears to persist as the same I across time. I am the I who thought yesterday, who thinks today, and who will think tomorrow. We are naturally inclined to mistake this logical unity and apparent permanence for the actual knowledge of an enduring, simple, and self-sufficient substance. We confuse the form of our self-consciousness with the material content of an actual soul object. It's a subtle but profound leap from the necessary unity of consciousness, the fact that all my thoughts belong to one single, to the notion of a concrete, permanent soul substance that possesses these thoughts. Rational psychology attempts to derive attributes like immortality or immateriality from this basic feature of our thinking I. It argues, since the I is simple and indivisible, it can't be split into parts like a physical object. It must be indestructible and therefore immortal. Or, since it's not extended in space like matter, it must be immaterial. But Kant reveals this inference to be a logical error, a paralogism. We are applying categories that are only valid for objects within experience, like substance, permanence, simplicity, to the I itself, which is the condition for all experience, not an experience itself. We have no empirical intuition, no sensory input, no direct experience of the I as a discrete, substantive entity. We only know it as the ongoing, unifying activity of thought. To assume that because the I is the enduring logical subject, it must therefore be an enduring substance, is to project our conceptual framework onto something that lies beyond its proper domain. So, what is the ultimate conclusion of this critique? Kant doesn't say that the soul doesn't exist. Rather, he asserts that pure theoretical reason, relying solely on logic and concepts, is fundamentally incapable of either proving or disproving the existence of an immortal soul. This question, so central to human hope and belief, lies beyond the reach of scientific, demonstrable knowledge. Our intellect can analyze the conditions of knowing, but it cannot transcend those conditions to grasp the ultimate nature of things like the soul as a substance. The soul, therefore, remains an idea that we cannot establish as a matter of objective fact through intellectual proofs. It falls outside the realm of what science and empirical observation can confirm or deny. For Kant, matters such as these would later find their grounding not in theoretical reason, but in the domain of practical reason, becoming postulates of morality and faith. But in the realm of pure, speculative thought, the grand ambition of rational psychology collapses under the weight of its own logical fallacies. We cannot know the I as a substance. We can only know it as the essential, unifying function of thought itself. Welcome back, as we continue our journey into Kant's monumental critique of pure reason. Today, we delve into Big Idea 9, the antinomies, a concept that shines a light on the profound paradoxes that arise when pure reason attempts to grasp the very nature of the universe, the cosmos itself. Imagine, for a moment, two brilliant philosophers, both wielding the sharpest tools of logic and pure reason, locked in a profound debate about the fundamental structure of reality. One argues fervently for the world having a definitive beginning, while the other asserts its infinite, boundless nature. What if Kant showed that both could be logically proven? This is the essence of the antinomies, sets of contradictory statements, each demonstrable through pure, unassisted reason, yet standing in direct opposition to one another. Here, we focus on the antinomy of the cosmos, specifically concerning its extent in time and space. Let's present the conflict. On one side, we have the thesis. The world has a beginning in time and is limited in its spatial extent. The argument here often posits that if the world were infinite in time, an infinite series of events would have had to occur before any given moment. But how can an actually infinite series ever be completed or traversed to arrive at the present? Logic seems to demand a starting point, a first event from which all others unfold. Similarly, an infinite world, as a completed totality, seems to defy our rational comprehension when we try to conceive of it as a single object. Now, consider the opposing view, the antithesis. The world is infinite in time and infinite in its spatial extent. If the world had a beginning, what existed before it? Empty time? And what caused something to arise from this absolute nothingness? Or why would it begin at one moment rather than another? Pure reason, it is argued, cannot conceive of a first cause without a prior cause, or of existence springing from absolute non-existence. Therefore, the world must have always existed, an unending chain of events, stretching infinitely backwards and forwards, boundless in space. Here lies the profound dilemma. Two perfectly rational arguments, each sound within its own premise, yet leading to diametrically opposed conclusions. Our pure reason, operating without empirical input, seems to be able to prove both that the world must have a beginning and that it cannot have one, that it must be finite and that it must be infinite. This isn't a flaw in our logic, but rather a profound indication of where reason might be overstepping its proper bounds. Kant's solution to this deep-seated contradiction is one of his most revolutionary insights. The error, he argues, isn't in the logic itself, but in the underlying assumption about what we are trying to understand. The problem arises because we're treating the world as a whole, as if it were a single, complete, independent object, a thing in itself, or what Kant calls a noumenon. We are attempting to apply categories of understanding, like beginning or infinite, to something that, by its very nature, lies beyond the realm of possible experience. Instead, Kant insists we must understand a world not as a noumenon, an absolute independent entity, but rather as a phenomenon. The world, for us, is a continuous, evolving series of experiences. It is the sum total of everything we can possibly encounter, observe, and understand through our senses and our innate categories of thought. When we approach the world as a series of possible experiences, the antinomy dissolves. Asking whether this series, as a whole, has an absolute beginning or is absolutely infinite is akin to asking for the boundary of a process that is always ongoing. Our actual experience is always finite. We always encounter a beginning to our observation of any particular sequence of events, and we never encounter the absolute boundary of space. But crucially, the possibility of further experience, of moving beyond any given limit, always remains open. Therefore, neither the thesis nor the antithesis is correct in its absolute assertion about the world as a whole. Both are erroneous because they presuppose that the world is a fully determinate, independent entity about which we can make claims that go beyond any possible experience. Kant shows us that reason's attempts to establish truths about the unconditioned totality of the universe, independent of our experience, inevitably lead to these irresolvable contradictions. The antinomies serve as a powerful cautionary tale. They demonstrate the inherent limits of pure reason. When reason ventures beyond the boundaries of possible experience, trying to grasp the things in themselves that constitute the universe in its ultimate form, it finds itself caught in an endless loop of self-contradiction. Our intellect is a magnificent tool, but it operates within a specific human sphere fundamentally bound by the conditions of our possible experience. Understanding these boundaries is, for Kant, the first step towards true philosophical wisdom. Now, let's explore one of the most profound and often misunderstood aspects of Kant's critique, his understanding of God. For Kant, the idea of God isn't about proving an entity exists in the observable world, nor is it a concept derived from pure intellectual speculation in the way traditional arguments often attempted. Instead, God emerges as a crucial regulative principle, a necessary focal point for our reason, rather than a factual, knowable object. To arrive at this understanding, Kant first meticulously dismantles one of philosophy's oldest and most revered arguments for God's existence, the ontological argument. For centuries, philosophers argued that if you could conceive of God as the most perfect being imaginable, then God must exist, because existence itself is a perfection. If God lacked existence, God wouldn't truly be the most perfect. But Kant, with his incisive logical scalpel, exposes a fundamental flaw in this reasoning. His core contention is this: existence is not a predicate. What does that mean precisely? When we describe something, we attribute predicates to it, qualities, characteristics. For instance, if I talk about a red car, red is a predicate that tells us something about the car. If I speak of a wise person, wise describes a quality of that person. But existence, Kant argues, is fundamentally different. It doesn't add a new quality or characteristic to a concept. Imagine $100. Whether those $100 exist in your pocket or merely is an idea in your mind, the concept of $100 remains the same. The amount, the value, these are predicates. Saying 100 existing dollars doesn't add a new property to the $100 themselves. It simply states that the concept is realized in the world. So, when we define God as the supremely perfect being, we list all imaginable perfections. But to then declare that this perfect being must exist because existence is a perfection is, for Kant, a logical leap. Existence isn't a property that enriches the concept of God. It's the condition under which any of God's properties can be realized. You cannot, in other words, simply define God into existence through logic alone. So, if God cannot be proven as a factual object of our understanding, does that mean God is irrelevant to Kant's philosophy? Quite the opposite. For Kant, God remains a profoundly significant, even necessary, concept, but not as a scientific fact or an object demonstrable by reason in the same way we prove a mathematical theorem or observe a physical phenomenon. Instead, God transforms into what Kant calls an ideal. This ideal of God functions as a crucial focal point, serving two primary purposes: achieving moral unity and rational unity. Firstly, for moral unity. When we act, we strive towards what is good, towards a perfect moral order. Even if we don't always achieve it, the very act of striving implies an ultimate standard, a supreme good towards which all our moral endeavors point. This ideal of God, representing supreme moral perfection, acts as an indispensable reference point, grounding our sense of duty and guiding our ethical choices. It gives meaning and purpose to our moral struggles, even if we cannot empirically verify a divine judge or an afterlife where all wrongs are righted. The very idea allows us to conceive of a world where moral order ultimately prevails. Secondly, God as an ideal fosters rational unity. Our intellect constantly seeks to organize all knowledge, to find systematic connections, and to understand the universe as a coherent, unified whole. To achieve this, reason posits an ultimate, supreme intelligence as the source and ground of all existence. This isn't a scientific theory to be tested, but a guiding principle that pushes our understanding to seek ever greater coherence and completeness. It's the ultimate why that drives our quest for knowledge, encouraging us to see the world not as a random collection of facts, but as a potentially interconnected system. This brings us to Kant's profound concept of the regulative idea. Unlike a constitutive idea, which would define an actual object we can know, a regulative idea doesn't tell us what is the case in reality. Instead, it tells us how we ought to think or ought to act to best achieve our goals, whether those goals are moral understanding or scientific discovery. Consider how this applies to our scientific endeavors. To effectively do science, to uncover the laws of nature, to seek out universal principles and systematic connections, we are well served by adopting a particular perspective. We must act as if everything in the natural world is designed by a supreme intelligence. This doesn't mean Kant is asserting that such an intelligence factually exists and engineered the universe. Rather, it's a powerful methodological tool. If we approach nature as if it were the product of a perfect, rational designer, we are compelled to look for order, coherence, elegance, and purpose. We are motivated to search for underlying laws that govern phenomena, to seek out fundamental unity amidst apparent diversity, and to believe that there are rational explanations for everything we observe. Without this regulative principle, without this guiding, as if our scientific investigations might become a mere accumulation of disconnected facts, we might lose the impetus to search for deeper, unifying principles, content with simply describing phenomena rather than explaining their underlying structures and relationships. The idea of God, therefore, as a regulative principle, acts as the ultimate horizon for our reason, constantly pushing us towards a more complete, unified, and systematic understanding of both the moral universe and the natural world. It doesn't prove God, but it illuminates the indispensable role the concept plays in the highest pursuits of human reason.